The head of the Process Church at this time and before was a man known as Robert de Grimston. His original name was Robert Moore, and he changed it to Robert de Grimston. He was born in Shanghai and was fascinated in psychology and in behavior modification, I mean very deeply so. And that led him through his brother to become involved in Scientology in England, in London, specifically in the Dianetics aspect. And de Grimston's wife was an ex-prostitute known as Mary Ann McLean, and they actually met while they were receiving high-level training in Scientology at the headquarters of Scientology at that time in Fitzroy Square in the prestigious Mayfair area of England, of London. Specifically it was number 2 Balfour Place, to be precise about it. Was where the Scientology headquarters at that time was, and Robert de Grimston and his wife met there, and it was their common interest in behavior modification and psychology that was important to remember. In fact, this McLean, not only was she a high-class prostitute, she was also once engaged to the boxer Sugar Ray Robinson. And it's interesting that this McLean was actually a high-class prostitute at the time of what was known as the Profumo case. I don't know if any of you have heard of that particular scandal in England at the time. There's an interesting tie-in there, which involved not only the usual obligatory John le Carré communist plot, it also involved high-class rituals, orgies, and all sorts of other occult phenomena. And she was in the circle around that. Their mascot was the Alsatian dog. Right from day one, when the Process appears in England, they are already running around with this mascots of these Alsatian dogs. And this is a big tie-in because it, again, corroborates what David Berkowitz was talking about, because 12 dogs were found brutally murdered in Yonkers Park, right where Berkowitz lived, and said that he had joined the cult. And these were dogs that had been buried and were placed in underground caverns in the Untermaier Park. And they'd been ritually sacrificed in a very, very hideous way. And that was the mascot of the Process Church. So that was a huge piece that started to lead the authorities in the right direction, because these dogs were dug up in the ducts beneath Yonkers. And as a matter of fact, another interesting tie-in was the fact that most of these rituals and gatherings of the cult that Berkowitz was talking about actually occurred on the grounds of a very sinister person, Samuel Untermaier. Maury Terry says that the Yonkers sacrifice site was a stone's throw from the large ruined estate of the late attorney and ardent Zionist Samuel Untermaier, who was referred to by a London magazine as a practicing Satanist. His estate had been constructed from imported stone and featured statuary from England. I mean, this place is still there. And before that it had been owned by, I think it was the Dufford family or something, I can't quite remember who owned it before. But these Untermaiers, along with Livingstones and Guggenheims and the Rockefellers and Harrimans and Shifts, these are people who all made their fortunes in slavery, in opium dealing and all sorts of other pernicious dealings, drug trafficking and spying, all over the world. And it's just interesting that literally a mile from the Yonkers site, this giant, basically Illuminati estate existed. I don't think that's a coincidence. But moving back to the Process, de Grimston and his wife then moved from London to Nassau. And anyone who knows anything about secret society, satanic cults, knows how important the island of Nassau is in this. It's been whistle-blown in various James Bond movies and other films. But it's a very important location. Why your masters would send you there, who you're going to meet when you get there. And then they moved from there to Mexico, which is again, from a secret society, from a satanic cult point of view, as Otis Toole and some of these other mass murderers have always openly said, Mexico plays an enormous role in this. It's no coincidence that so many serial killers like Richard Ramirez come from there. And Otis Toole whistleblowed it. He said that yet the cult that they belonged to, which I believe was called the Black Hand or something like that, they had a Mexico connection. And the Grimstons stayed there for a few months in the Yucatan Peninsula, where we know many of the ancient Maya and Aztec places are. Very ancient site. And then, because of a giant hurricane that came during that period there, they had to move back to London. And when they got there, they moved to Mayfair again. Now, Mayfair is interesting because that is the home, the area district As you can see, it's absolutely almost in the center of London. So from a ritualistic point of view, and believe me, London is very much a ritualistic city in many respects. That particular area is the home of the Grosvenor family, another important satanic bloodline that David Icke and others have gone into. The de Grimstons then visited Israel and came back to London and published the article in their magazine called Mind Benders, which is again about mind control and human behavior. But just the positioning of their headquarters and this area, this Oxford Street, sort of Mayfair, Hanover Square, is connected to the British East India Company, and again, you just need to study the street layouts and the various symbolism attached to these places. We'd go into it for hours if we went down that road. But it's also no surprise in a way that some of the sort of celebrity set that we have today are all sort of ensconced in places like Hanover Square and Primrose Hill and are featured there. That also plays a part in all of this. Eventually they moved back to America and have their first official headquarters in America. It's on Royal Street in New Orleans. Again, anyone who's into satanic cult activity knows how important New Orleans is as a ritual city. And this has been blown in some of these hideous movies like Angel Heart and others, and in some of the James Bond films again. The implications of this horrendous place, which deals in trafficking and all sorts of illicit activity. And then finally de Grimston himself moved to Louisiana in December 1967, and the church opened its San Francisco office, as well as on the continent in Germany. They had offices as well. In 1971, they received a grant from the Canadian government to engage in social work. And this thing with charities and social work is another key piece of this. This was whistleblown in the movie Betrayers, and you have to get the right one. It's the one with Martin Sheen, because I believe there's two movies. If you get the movie Betrayers, this whole thing we're talking about here regarding charities and children's homes is whistleblown in that film. I highly recommend it. But they were working, taking care of animals. In fact, I believe that one aspect of the processed church that still exists today is very much involved in dog welfare, looking after dogs. They were involved in soup kitchens and so on. They got a grant in Canada. In 1974, de Grimston and Mary Ann split. And this, in the history of the processed church, this is considered an important split because it's at that point that Mary Ann McLean assumed control. And they think that Robert de Grimston's power may have waned at that point. And he may not have been as responsible for some of the occult's activities after that point. Again, we don't really know. One thing to remember here at this point is that they changed their name. After the split happened between the de Grimstons, the processed church changed its name to the Foundation Church of the Millennium. And then finally, as it is now known today, the Foundation Faith in God. And these people have a network of what you would call, PR people, basically. They haven't sat quiet. They've known that they got bad press. Some of it may be justified, others may not. I'm the first to admit that. This is an ongoing study. And they have their people who also come, their spin merchants, you see, to present them in a much more friendly way. In 1975, a large headquarters was finally established in Manhattan. And in 76, there was a lot of media coverage. In 1976, they got a lot of coverage from the New York media on their beliefs and their charity work. Charity work is one way of getting a lot of interest, you see, from people. And also you win a lot of donations from that. It's a way to bring in a lot of finances. In 2005, Mary Ann de Grimston died. And the Foundation Church of the Millennium, or as we said, the Foundation Faith in God, moved to Las Vegas. That's where it is now. And this branch presently is headed by a woman I can only refer to now at this point as Madam N, for nameless.